let's get started. All right.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about some important topics that are going on in our country. The first one that I wanted to tackle was these massive cuts that the current administration is implementing that's hurting, in my opinion, the VA, right? The biggest thing from my perspective, the first thing, and I'm interested in yours, is number one, veterans aren't calling for these cuts.
No.
Okay, so Donald Trump and his VA secretary and the Elon Musk DOGE people who have clearly never served their country in uniform and have no idea what that really means, are sweeping through all the agencies, and they're going to the VA, and they are talking about cutting 80,000 jobs at the VA. And the current secretary of the VA says, hey, stand by. There's major changes. Get used to it. But don't worry, veterans. It's not going to affect your health care. Let me just say right off the bat, that is total bullshit.
Well, I know Doug Collins.
I'm sure you do.
Hi, Doug. And I think part of it, when you're looking at Doug, I don't know, after being in Congress so long, maybe he doesn't understand what it means to actually lose health care. I was in Congress. The health care is amazing. I don't know if people know this. We have our own personal doctor in Congress.
That's nice.
Isn't that nice? Yeah, drink to that. Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you're looking at is that most of the veterans didn't ask for this, but what else? When you look at who votes for Donald Trump, it's veterans, right? If you look across the board, if you're talking about leaning right, it's mostly going to be veterans in the U.S. Armed Forces. So you have Doug Collins, who I believe really didn't make that great of decisions when he was in Congress anyway, somebody who would sell out quickly based on where he's at. I mean, look what he got. He got the VA job, right? And, the other thing, too, is that what's interesting is I think there's going to be a massive backlash because when you talk about inefficiencies in the VA, and me and you have talked about this before, we know there are inefficiencies in the VA, but you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And you have to have a nuanced look based on experts in the medical field, the insurance field, and the care field. They need to have some kind of tiger team initially to get started. Now, a tiger team is a team, everybody, of experts that are put together to actually fix a problem, right, or to address a problem. I haven't seen that. I just saw, hey, Trump calls Doug. Doug says cut. People cut. Veterans don't matter. And they think that they can somehow roll over it.
Elon says cut, and Doug just rolls along with that.
Well, of course.
But here's the thing. I mean, you cannot cut 80,000 workers and expect better healthcare outcomes. It just doesn't work that way.
It does.
Here's what annoys me. The VA, and a lot of people say, well, hey, how come you can't just privatize veterans' healthcare? Well, number one, there's no big calling to privatize. There are some right-wing veterans groups that were led by Pete Hegseth and many of the current, unfortunately, assistant secretaries of the VA who always wanted to privatize the VA. They could never do it. Why? Because there's no broad calling to privatize the VA from veterans or from the American public. It's always an eyesore to them, right? Because what is VA healthcare? It's universal healthcare for veterans.
Well,
it's socialized medicine. And it works. Now, it's not perfect.
No.
Now, my husband and I both get our health care through the VA. And we will tell you, it's not perfect. But in our region, it's great. They do tremendous work. But it's every region is different. And we have to concede that. But we have to make it better, not throw it away.
Well, preach, Amy, because I would say even the distillery cat was meowing while you were preaching and here in the distillery knowing that you're absolutely correct, right, on what's going on. And is that Kitty over there?
Well-fed cat.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Way to go, Kitty. What's that cat's name? Can anybody tell me the cat's name?
Barley.
No. Is it Barley? Well, damn right. Oh, you know what? I do taste the notes of malt.
Here's the thing I want to ask you, though.
Right.
Why? Because you're a Republican, you know all these guys.
I do.
Why are they doing this? Why are they? Because clearly it's going to hurt vets. It may not hurt vets in proportion to our age. It may not hurt sort of younger vets as much, but a lot of older vets really rely on the VA. My uncle, for example, is a Vietnam vet who had an illness related to Agent Orange. And he got a lot of care later on in his life dealing with that. That is not something that you get from the local clinic. And that's another thing that a lot of, I think, Americans need to understand is the VA helps veterans specifically, blast injuries,
Yeah.
traumatic brain injuries, things that
Burn
that
pits.
only, I mean, you don't get exposed to Agent Orange in civilian life.
No.
You don't get exposed as much to toxic fumes the way we were exposed to toxic fumes in Afghanistan and Iraq. That, by the way, the last administration passed the PACT Act
Mhm.
that allowed veterans of our generation to get health care from, and now they're basically trying to undermine all this. Why are they doing that?
Because they're Blue Falcons. I think when I was in the 116th and when you went into the 117th, I don't know if it was 16 to 18% maybe representative were veterans in Congress, which is well over the 1 to 2% of the American population. But I think what you're looking at, and people can look up Blue Falcon. Please look in your Urban Dictionary for what
We're
that
not going
means,
to say
please.
it here.
So, so please do that. But it's incredible to me, Amy, that you have former veterans that are sort of going down this line, and you ask me a very profound question: is why do they do it? I think there's three things, and I think people listening to this podcast or this show are going to be a little bit shocked at how basic it is. They're worried about polling, they're worried about fundraising, and they're worried about winning. Let me say that again. They're worried about polling, they're worried about fundraising, and they're worried about winning. That's it. They're worried about their crosstabs and their polling. And I think when you look at it, if you have a 73%, say you have a 73% approval rate, like in my district, right? We're in Virginia 5, right? It's probably still about 10,000 square miles. It's as big as New Jersey. All they're worried about is what that 2 years looks like. And it's a little bit different from the Senate. When you look at the House, as soon as you win, you're already running for the next term.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, when I first came in, I don't know if a lot of people know this, McCarthy said something pretty interesting. He said, winners make history. And then we have to win no matter what. And I think what you're looking at is people betraying the very oath that they're taking because they believe that they have to be subservient, to a guy who's gone bankrupt six times and is a felon.
Why even get into that position? You want that position so bad, and then when you get into it, you basically just throw all of your morals and principles away to keep the position. What's the point? I mean, the Republican Party used to be the party of national security, used to be the party of, hey, I'm going to stand for veterans. And now they're just A-OK with cutting veterans' health care. And here's the other thing about being a veteran. And yes, you and I are both veterans, so, maybe don't take this the wrong way for people that are watching, but here's my belief. We ask people to sign the dotted line for 4 years of their life, at least 4 years of their life.
At least.
Put on a uniform, go through a tremendous amount of pretty hard shit, okay, in training. Maybe put your life at risk and go into harm's way. You don't know if you're going to go, but you might. And you could be a logistician. You could be an admin person, and you can be in harm's way. It does not matter what your quote MOS is. You sign the dotted line for 4 years. You basically give up your rights. And in return, we give a handshake deal to these less than 1% of Americans that do this. And that handshake deal is a little more than a handshake. It used to be an actual promise. Prior to the Trump administration, it was a promise. And that promise says, we're going to give you some GI benefits. We're going to give you some educational benefits. You might get your college paid for, depending on what state you're in, right? We might give you a better home loan, a better rate
correct.
On home loan.
Yeah, I've used it.
We might give you preferential treatment on getting a federal job if you get out. But the biggest thing we give people, the biggest thing is you're going to get health care for life, quality health care for life. And right now, the attack on that is what is making me very upset.
I think if everybody was listening right now, what you should do is look at your state, because we're going to hit all 50 states on this amazing podcast called Truth in the Barrel. But look at how many people are covered under VA.
9 million. 9 million veterans.
9 million.
Serve this country.
Serve this country. So are you telling us that somehow an individual that's put there had somehow the wisdom and the foresight to make those cuts in the first 100 days of administration without looking at really what the impacts of that funding are? It just goes to show you that there's incompetence, inefficiencies, and power mongering that are driving the decision making in the VA right now. And I think that's something we have to accept, but it's something we also have to fight. And as we go through the next 2 to 4 years, I think it's something that, and I'm going to say this as a Republican, as a former Republican, Democrats need to look at how veterans are being taken care of, and I think that's an issue for Democrats, independents, even the center-right never-Trumpers. They need to look how veterans are taken care of. And I think if they do that, I think there's a way forward. There's a path to use the VA and what's happening there as a broader definition of what's happening with this whole administration.
Yeah, and the final thing on this, just for people, I mean, when you walk into the VA and your therapists, the people who are doctors and nurses, have to greet you at the counter because we fired all the people that we think are, quote, non-essential. I mean, that doesn't make a good running health organization. We're firing people right now that are doing things like making sure our health records that from the active duty get into the Veterans Administration. I mean, these are important things for healthcare. I mean, I'm not an expert, but like just the blanket firing of people just makes me really upset. And also because these are people that, you know, they're caring for veterans. You know,
They are.
They could be out there doing lots of things, but they care about, you know, the folks that serve this country.
Can you imagine how they're feeling now? And I think what I would say is to Donald Trump and Doug, don't be a Blue Falcon administration. I think that's really that's where we're at.
I think there already are. But hey.
Agreed. Cheers to that.
All right.
Cheers.
Next topic.
All right. Let's go.